There are people who were born with the kind of presence that makes an entire room hold its breath the moment they walk in. And you are one of them. You need no sound, no introduction, no one standing up to declare anything. You only have to appear and the atmosphere changes. People do not understand why, but they feel an invisible force rising from you, like the ground shifting beneath their feet faster than the eye can catch. They do not know what to call it, but you know. Even if you have never dared to say it aloud, you were never meant to fit into the molds they built to keep everything still and under control. From the very first moment, your energy made many people look away, not because you were confrontational, but because your silence exposed the limits they had accepted as their life. Those limits were always as fragile as mist on glass, yet they learned to treat them like walls of stone. So when you stand there, a real body, a soul that refuses to bow, they do not know which truth they must face first, that they have lived below their own potential, or that you are living proof that such a life was never destiny. And in that moment, they begin to fear you. Nothing you do causes this. No words leave your lips. You simply exist. And your presence cracks a line across the invisible structure they have spent their lives building to avoid looking at themselves. Yet all these things, whether you ask for them or not, cling to you like a shadow that never leaves. Because someone who lives true to themselves always becomes the sharpest mirror the world must look into. That mirror reflects not the outer form, but the truths they have avoided for years. There are nights when you wonder why the older you grow, the more you meet uneasy eyes, voices that hide blades inside their tone, and long stretches of silence drawn out for no reason as you walk by. But then a sentence rises from a place deeper than memory, like something belonging to the soul more than the mind. Psalm 25:14 says, "The Lord reveals his covenant to those who fear him, not fear that trembles, but reverence for truth, for light, for the calling that lies beyond the ordinary rhythm of this life." And you understand, even without speaking it, that this covenant has touched you long ago. That is why you cannot shrink, cannot pretend, cannot live inside the boxes the world sells as safety. You do not belong to the kind of stability they worship like a throne. You belong to movement, to unfolding, to an honesty that cannot be bent. Those who live by the old way saw this in you even before you understood yourself. They knew they could not place you where they wanted. They knew they could not win you with praise, nor diminish you with criticism. They knew you were not waiting for anyone to clear a path, and even less for anyone to grant you permission. This unsettled them in ways they never dared to admit. When you walk into a room, their minds scatter. How do I keep this person within reach? How do I make sure they do not surpass me? How do I make them forget the strength they carry? They never say these things, but the restless energy in their eyes speaks for them. You feel it, the way someone hears water rushing beneath the earth. From very early on, you grew familiar with smiles that never reached the eyes, compliments dusted with doubt, handshakes lighter than they should be. You know the feeling of people pulling themselves inward a little when standing beside you, as if you were dragging them out of the comfort zone they cling to. You know that quiet tension, even though you never knew how to handle it. When people try to make you smaller, they do not realize they are not resizing you. They are cutting down their own field of vision. They do not resent you. They resent the feeling of being exposed. You are only the side effect of a truth too large for them to face. You move through long days carrying two currents within you, one that wants to shrink for the sake of peace, and one that wants to rise because your soul refuses to lie still in the dark. The second current is always stronger. It burns in every breath, every decision, every moment you refuse to live by someone else's expectations. Sometimes you think you are stubborn, but no, it is not stubbornness. It is the nature of someone entrusted with something larger than themselves. Others see this, sometimes even more clearly than you do, so they try to name you in ways that make you question who you are. Too unusual, too intense, too direct, too different. But have you noticed something? The word "too" appears before every description they place on you. It shows the limit lies in them, not in you. You are not too anything. You are simply yourself, without a filter to dim your own light. And because light never asks permission to shine, those who are not used to it feel blinded. They shield their eyes with words, with gestures, with relationships built on comfort rather than truth. But the light continues to spread, even when you do nothing. What frightens them is not what you say, but what you make them feel about themselves. In your silence, they hear their own disappointment. In your footsteps, they see the paths they refuse to take. In your honesty, they see the moments they chose the easier direction. And then you realize, slowly but surely, that you were not created to satisfy anyone. Your presence is a reminder that what they call unbreakable laws are only old habits. You are the first drumbeat that cracks the monotony they call life. You do not know exactly where your journey will lead, but you know this. Even if you have never spoken it aloud, if your soul has been opened by a covenant not written by this world, then this world has no power to close it. It is not a coincidence that whenever you come near, those who are used to living inside their comfort zones pause as if a cold wind has just brushed past them. They cannot explain that feeling, but their bodies understand before their minds that you do not live by the rules they use to keep their world standing. You do not walk the way they walk. You do not react the way they react. You do not bend to the expectations they have learned to place on everyone around them. And that very difference makes them see you as a fragment of chaos, stepping out from a map they were never taught to read. In their eyes, you are like a wind that changes direction without warning. When they think they have caught your rhythm, you shift. When they believe you will retreat, you advance. When they hope you will soften, you choose to stand tall. They do not dislike you because you are strong. They dislike the feeling of not being able to predict you. People only feel safe when everything follows the pattern they have memorized. You break the pattern without even trying. Your natural way of being is the very thing that unsettles them. The truth is, beneath the watchful eyes and the half-hidden remarks, what they fear most is that you might shatter the illusion of control they built, like a fence between themselves and the truth. Those who survive by control cannot tolerate uncertainty. They need everything to repeat in the same familiar way so their sense of power does not shake. But you, by simply existing, cut right across that pattern. You have never done anything to start a battle, yet your silence alone is enough to throw them off balance. You do not have to speak. You only have to stand there with the eyes that see through their layers, and their hearts already tremble, not because you judge them, but because they fear you might see what they have buried deepest. The fear of not being enough. The fear of living a life too small for what their soul once dreamed of. And in that moment, Psalm 37.4 rises like a familiar sound from the depths. Delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. Not a promise of reward, but a reminder that your strength never rests on the shoulders of people. You are not shaped by their gaze. You are not limited by their approval or refusal. What you carry does not come from their hands, so they cannot take it away. These people struggle not because you disturb their lives, but because you make them see that their lives were never as stable as they believed. They think as long as everyone around them follows the same rhythm, they will stand firm, but you walk in with a different rhythm, and the foundation they rely on begins to tremble. They try to ignore it, but their souls feel it clearly. When they look at you, they do not only see who you are, They see who they refused to become. They see the boldness they once had before fear tightened its grip. They see the honesty they once believed in before they learned to stay quiet for acceptance. They see the life they abandoned in exchange for cheap safety. And when someone is forced to face themselves, the most natural reaction is resistance. They laugh to hide their unease. They judge to avoid truth. They label you as unpredictable so they do not have to admit that they are the ones who have locked themselves in a narrow frame. You have seen this more than once. Sometimes you step into a room and feel the glances brushing over you, like fingers checking what category you belong to, whether you will obediently follow the order they have arranged. But then they realize you belong to none of their categories. You are not a troublemaker, but you are not someone who stands still either. You are the variable every system fears. You do not create chaos, you simply exist. But to those who depend on fear to control, your freedom is chaos. It forces them to rethink the way they see, the way they live, the way they believe, and that is too big, too real, too much for them to accept. Some people walk away from you for reasons they cannot express. They say you are too different, too hard to read, not the right energy. But what they truly mean is, you make me face what I do not want to see. They do not hate you. They hate the version of themselves that appears in your presence. This world does not fear you doing wrong. This world fears you living right. Living right wakes sleepers. Living right makes those repeating the same patterns think again. Living right cracks the old systems open. You did not choose this role. This role chose you. And even when you want to escape it, when you want to shrink yourself, when you want to blend into the crowd to make life simpler, you know you cannot. The light inside you was never placed there to sit quietly in a corner. It was placed in you to stir, to awaken, to open paths. Those who do not understand you will continue to be confused. They will try to fit you into names, judgments, stories to feel safe. But in the deepest part of their soul, they know the truth. You are not like them. You carry something they have forgotten the way back to, and from here on, your journey will no longer revolve around what they think of you. It will revolve around your courage to walk where they never dared to walk, to touch the part of the soul they locked away. There is a moment in life, even if you cannot remember the date, your soul remembers it clearly. It is the moment you stopped waiting for permission. No one taught you this. No one stood in front of you and told you the time had come. But a very quiet, very deep moment opened right in the middle of the most ordinary things. Like when you stood in a room you knew too well, looked at yourself, and realized that the smallness you carried for so long was not the truth, but only a habit shaped by doubtful eyes, by vague advice, by the barriers people built around you to keep their world in order. That moment did not arrive with noise. There was no thunder, no bright light, no one patting your shoulder. It was simply silence becoming heavier, deeper, as if the air around you shifted and you stood inside it fully awake. In that moment, you recognized what you had avoided for years. That power is never handed to you by someone else. Power is born the moment you stand tall and stop shrinking yourself. Psalm 18:32 rises right then, not as sound, but as knowing. It is God who arms me with strength. That line does not come to comfort you. It comes to remind you that the strength you seek was never out there. It has been within you since the time you did not dare to imagine you could be strong. And the only thing that kept you from using it was the habit of lowering yourself so others would not feel disturbed. Once you understand this, your steps change. You do not walk faster. You do not walk slower. You walk with a steadiness that makes those who were used to seeing you hesitate look twice. They wonder what happened. Yet they do not know that the change does not belong to this world. It belongs to the part of your soul that has stayed silent, waiting for the day you had the courage to open the door. And once the door opens, there is no way to close it. You begin to speak the things you once kept inside, not to challenge anyone, but because you now understand that your silence once gave others permission to define you as they wished. You no longer enter a room worried about being judged. You enter as someone who knows they have the right to stand there. You do not have to claim space. The space adjusts naturally to your presence. That moment is not pride, it is a homecoming. And when you change, every reaction around you changes too. Some people step back, not because they dislike you, but because they are not used to the version of you that no longer folds. Others watch you closely. They wait for you to stumble, to apologize for this new boldness. But you know clearly, this boldness does not arrive to be apologized for. It arrives to release you from the years you lived below what your soul called you to be. Some look at you with curiosity mixed with discomfort. They were used to you managing yourself to fit their expectations. When you stop doing that, they lose their reference point. They no longer know which category to place you in. But that is no longer your concern. You were not born to fit inside the boxes they use to understand the world. As you walk into new days with this reclaimed strength, every limit that once stopped you suddenly looks small. Not because you deny difficulty, but because you now see clearly that fear was never a wall of stone. It was only a thin veil. What held you back was never lack of ability. It was your belief in the voices that taught you to doubt yourself. Now, as you stand inside the truth, their words no longer weigh the same. And that makes them uneasy. Those who rely on manipulation always want your reaction. Those who rely on control always want your permission. Those who rely on doubt always want your explanation. But you no longer step into that game. You owe no one permission to grow stronger. And this is when you look at yourself with an honesty that makes no deals. You never waited for permission. You only believed you had to. The things they said, the looks they used, the values they imposed, all were designed to keep you just safe enough, just obedient enough, just small enough not to threaten anyone. But you did not come here to live a life of just enough. You came to live a life that does not hide the strength placed in you long before you knew what to call it. And at this point, in the middle of this quiet transformation, I want you to pause for one breath and ask yourself, have you ever felt this moment, the moment you knew you could not return to the old version of yourself? If you have, write down one line, any line, to mark that you are passing through this new doorway. And if you want to stay connected to your journey, you can continue reading so you do not miss a word that belongs to you. Not an advertisement, not an obligation. Simply an invitation to stay close to what your soul is calling. Because from here on, every step you take will no longer be the step of someone asking for permission, but the step of someone reclaiming the wings that always belonged to them. Those who doubted you will have to look again. Those who underestimated you will have to adjust their view. But most importantly, you will never bow out of old habit again. This self-mastery does not arrive to make you arrogant. It arrives to place you back in the position you lost during the years you lived small. When you stand there, the light within you no longer dims. It no longer trembles in the shadow of others. It stands tall, illuminating the path you are about to walk. And the most beautiful part is this: that light does not need anyone's approval. It only needs you to stop running from it. There are moments when you walk into a place and the air seems to shift, and even though no one says a word, you can feel the change in their eyes, their breath, even the way they hold their bodies. Not because you want to influence anything, but because your presence unintentionally exposes what they have tried to hide beneath the calm of their everyday selves. You become a mirror no one asked for, yet everyone fears. In that mirror, They see themselves without decoration, without illusion, only the bare truth they have avoided for years. What you do is not exposing them. What you do is simply arriving with your own truth. And when that truth stands next to the compromises they have lived with for too long, the contrast becomes too obvious for them to pretend not to see. They start shifting their gaze, changing the subject, offering half compliments with half-hidden stings, or putting on a forced calmness. None of these reactions reflect your worth. They only reflect the battles they are fighting within. There are words like, "Why do you always try so hard? Why so serious? You do not need to be that strong." These lines sound light, but they are not aimed at you. They are aimed at the version of themselves that appears when you stand there. They do not blame you for being strong. They blame themselves for being weak. They do not blame you for pursuing. They blame themselves for giving up. They do not blame you for moving forward. They blame themselves for choosing to stay still. Psalm 139:23 rises in that space like an echo from deep within the soul. Search me, God. Yet that plea is not for punishment. It is the invitation of a soul longing to be illuminated. Even if illumination hurts, you do not stand there to judge them. You stand as living proof that truth always finds a way out, no matter how tightly people try to cover it. When others look at you, they see your straight path and remember the twists they took to fit someone's expectations. They see your courage and remember the moments they missed because they feared failure. They see the steadiness in your eyes and remember the times they traded their truth for the comfort of belonging to something that no longer matched who they were. You do not need to say a word for this to happen. Your presence alone is enough, because the nature of light is to reveal, and when a soul enters carrying a light that does not tremble, every shadow around it becomes clear. It is not you who hurts them. It is truth that hurts them. You are simply the place where truth reflects. So they react in the natural way of someone not used to being illuminated. They shrink. They try to make you doubt yourself. They tell stories meant to reduce the weight of what you have accomplished. Not because they truly believe you are not enough, but because they do not want to face the fact that they have chosen to live below what their soul once longed for. Attacking you allows them to maintain the illusion that their choice was good enough. But deep down, they know you did not come to make them comfortable. You came to remind them that there is a version of themselves they have abandoned. You once wondered why your strength makes others pull back instead of come closer, why one honest sentence from you can make someone go cold, why the more real you are, the more they avoid you. But now you understand. You are not only yourself, you are a reminder. You are the sound in an otherwise quiet room that makes them turn their head. You are the line between the life they are living and the life they know they could live if they had enough courage. This is not a burden, it is a recognition. Because not everyone is given the ability to make others face their own souls. Not everyone carries an energy that forces the places they enter to become more honest, even when people resist it. Not everyone can reveal what has been hidden simply by standing there. The hardest part is that you are not trying to do any of this. And because you are not trying, you do not know how to control it. You only notice its weight when others are shaken by what you never intended to cause. But the truth is, this is not yours to control. It is yours to recognize. You were created to influence by presence, not by force. You were sent into rooms where your energy would loosen the illusions people have lived with for too long. And even though it sometimes makes you lonely, makes you wonder if you are wandering off path, you will realize this is not loneliness. This is the natural separation between those ready to face truth and those who choose to stay asleep in their darkness. The ones who are ready will come closer. The ones who are not will step back. No one is wrong. No one is right. Different levels of light create different distances. You do not have to adjust yourself so they stay. You do not have to dim your light to make them comfortable. Light is not born to fit. Light is born to reveal. And the moment you accept that you are not harming anyone, you are only making truth visible. You will step into the deeper part of your journey, where you no longer fear their gaze, because you finally understand that their gaze was never about you. It only ever spoke about them. A strange thing always happens when your true strength begins to show. People who once ignored your presence suddenly become unusually attentive, not to lift you up, but in a way where they cannot stop watching you, as if your existence threatens a structure they believe must stay untouched for them to feel safe. And then one day, you hear your name coming from the mouths of people who were never close enough to understand you. They speak about you with certainty, as if they know the story you are living. Yet the strange part is this: they only begin talking about you when you rise beyond the place they thought you should remain. No one throws stones at an empty space. No one gossips about what carries no weight. When your name appears in conversations you are not part of, it is not a sign that you are causing trouble. It is a sign that you are going further than they expected. They see you surpassing limits they believed were impossible. They see you doing things they once wished for but never had the courage to try. And that unsettles them in ways they will never admit. People do not talk about you because you are wrong. They talk about you because they fear you might be right. If what you are doing is truly possible, if the path you are walking really leads to a wider life, then they must face the hardest question. Why have they never tried? Why have they stayed still? Why have they chosen a smaller life? Your progress, even the smallest shift in your spirit, becomes a reminder of what they have lost. And when a soul is not ready to face the truth, its instinct is distortion. They twist your journey to protect themselves. They say you are lucky. They say you were favored. They say you have something others do not. None of these words describe you. They are shields to help them avoid the truth, that they once had the chance to stand where you stand now, but they turned away. In those moments, Psalm 31:20 becomes a quiet covering around you. God hides them in the shelter of His presence from the strife of men. This does not mean you will never be mentioned, never be misunderstood, never be opposed. It only reminds you that there is a place set aside for souls being led higher, a place where the noise of others cannot touch their essence. You do not need to join the battles others create, because your soul is held in a light they cannot reach. What is almost humorous is how they unintentionally clear a path for you while thinking they are blocking it. Every word they speak, every distortion they spread, echoes like a drum announcing to the world that someone is rising beyond the ordinary. You become a center of attention without trying. You become a story without needing to tell one. And their inability to look away only expands your influence. They think their words will pull you down, but what they do not realize is this: anything spoken from fear is never strong enough to touch someone who walks in truth. You do not need to argue. You do not need to defend yourself. You do not need to prove innocence or worth. Those who walk on the ground argue to protect their position. Those who rise do not argue. They simply continue rising. And you have felt this before. You have noticed how certain judgments no longer carry weight, how rumors sound like wind passing through, how people can talk endlessly about you without changing a single step you take. You no longer feel the need to turn around and respond, because you know those voices belong to the ground, and you are being lifted higher each day. When they say you think you are better, what they truly mean is, I do not want to see you become what I refused to become. When they say you are going too far, they mean, you are making me question how long I have been standing still. When they attach false stories to your name, what they are doing is trying to keep you within a boundary they believe everyone should accept. But you are no longer inside that boundary. You are walking into a space they never dared to imagine. That space is not free of challenge. It is simply free of the hands that pull you down out of fear of your light. And here is a truth few are willing to say aloud. The more people talk about you, the less you need to talk about yourself, because your existence already explains everything more clearly than any argument ever could. You do not enter debates to claim the right side. You do not engage in the spirals of reasoning built from insecurity. You just keep moving toward where your soul is called, and that direction itself is the only answer required. Your name on their lips is proof that you have stirred something in their world, and that movement, whether spoken from goodwill or resentment, confirms one thing: you have touched what they cannot ignore. You do not need to stop and ask who is speaking. You do not need to turn around to see whether they understand you, because someone called to go far has no assignment to carry those who are not ready. You only need to keep your steps aligned with the light ahead, for when you do, the voices behind you will grow faint, then fade into the background noise of a world you no longer belong to. There is a season in your journey when every bit of noise around you seems louder than usual. Some people offer advice, others scrutinize, and some try to bend you into the standards they believe are right. They want you softer, gentler, smaller, not because they care about you, but because they live in a world where everyone tries to please each other, so no one has to face the truth that they are not living as fully as they could. But the more you grow, the more clearly you see one simple truth. The desire to be liked is the quietest trap, binding the soul with invisible strings that many never notice in their entire lifetime. You were once caught in that trap without realizing it. You softened your words so others would not feel uncomfortable. You lowered your voice so you would not be seen as too strong. You hid the most beautiful parts of yourself so you would not be called too different. But looking back, you can see those moments for what they were. Times when you locked the door to your own life with your own hands. Every time you shrank, you stepped one pace away from the nature that was placed inside you from the beginning. You once confused being liked with being accepted, but then, in the stillness of some night, the truth appeared sharp and direct. Liking is the surface. Respect is the foundation. People can like you today and turn away tomorrow. They can applaud you when it suits them and disappear the moment you no longer fit their preference. But respect is different. Respect stands firm in the wind. Respect does not require you to bow. Respect does not demand that you dim your light. You understand that when you live truthfully, you will not be loved by the masses. The masses do not know how to love someone who does not mirror them, but they will respect you, even if they dislike the truth you carry. And that understanding becomes part of your strength. When you begin to live from your real power, you realize that relationships built on cheap agreement can no longer hold you. You revisit conversations you once joined simply to blend in and see how hollow they were, unable to touch your soul anymore. You realize you can no longer perform in a play you never believed in. Some may call you cold. Some may say you have grown distant, but the truth is, you are not colder. You simply no longer waste energy on conversations that do not move you forward. You are not distant. You have simply stopped clinging to relationships that cannot hold if you show up as your honest self. Your story is no longer about pleasing anyone. It becomes a story of keeping your inner foundation solid as stone so you are not shaken by praise or criticism. And in that moment, Psalm 46:5 settles deep in your heart. God is within her. She will not fall. Its stillness helps you understand that what holds you steady has never been the eyes of others. What holds you steady is the inner strength no one can take away. You begin to recognize the difference between those who come to you because of your light and those who come only to enjoy the warmth of it. The second group cannot walk with you for long. When your light becomes a mirror that reflects their delay, they will leave. And that is not a loss. It is a filtering. Souls not ready to stand near truth will step aside, making room for those who see you as you are becoming. You no longer ache over their departure. You no longer feel empty when someone cannot keep pace with your journey. You understand that not all souls share the same depth, the same speed, the same tolerance for light. Everyone is in a different chapter, and your step into a new chapter will naturally cause some to stop walking beside you. That is not failure. That is evolution. As you rise into yourself, others will respond in two ways. They will either expand their soul to walk closer or shrink back to protect the familiar. But whichever they choose, it is no longer your task to adjust yourself to keep them in your story. You recognize there are battles you do not need to fight. There are arguments you do not need to answer. There are comments you do not need to carry. People may say you have changed, but they do not understand that you are not changing direction. You are simply returning to your true direction. Something beautiful happens when you stop trying to be liked. Your heart becomes lighter. You no longer wake up afraid someone misunderstood you. You no longer live with the fear of disappointing someone. You look into the mirror and no longer see a reflection shaped by others' expectations. You see yourself. Simple, clear, steady. And when you stand fully in that truth, your power no longer comes from seeking approval, but from integrity in every breath. People may not like you, but they cannot deny you. They may talk about you, but they cannot ignore you. Your steadiness stops being something they compare with others and becomes something they must confront within themselves. Why do I not stand as firmly? In that moment, you understand why you were never born to be loved by the masses. You were born to make this world more honest. And honesty will always walk with respect, not popularity. You do not need to chase anyone. You do not need to seek anyone's permission. You do not need the approval of the world to move forward. You only need not betray yourself. There are days when you look around and realize the language you speak is no longer on the same frequency as the people standing beside you. Not because you speak of lofty things, but because you speak through action while they speak through fear. You offer an idea, and they immediately answer with reasons it will fail. You open a new door, and they ask what will happen if everything collapses. You look forward while they look down, terrified that one misstep will shatter their fragile world. But you no longer belong to that rhythm. You do not live by predicting the worst that could happen. You live by the instinct that a soul called to go far carries its own momentum, not reckless bravado, but the clarity that tells you when to act and when to stay still. You move not because you are fearless, but because fear is not a reason to remain frozen, while others hesitate long enough to miss their own timing. You have already taken 3 steps, not to prove anything, but because movement is the nature of who you are. People look at you and think you are rushing, reckless, too bold. But what they do not understand is that you are not chasing life. You are keeping pace with the covenant that awakened your soul. When they see you move, they only see action. What they do not see are the quiet hours spent discerning, the moments when you stood between darkness and light without stepping back. They do not see the process. They only see the outcome. And because they cannot hear the rhythm within you, they assume you are unpredictable. But the truth is, you were not born to be predictable. You were born to follow a calling not everyone can hear. That is why you cannot explain yourself to them. The more you try, the less they understand. They do not lack vocabulary. They lack experience. They have never stood on the ground where you have stood, never wrestled with the fractures that shaped you, never heard a calling so deep that ignoring it would feel like betrayal. And so they say, you are different. They say you are hard to read. They place labels on you to make you more familiar so they can feel safe again. But you do not belong to their fear. You were not designed to shrink just because someone else is not ready to walk beside you. You enter your own space knowing that light never dims itself to match a small room. It is in that moment Psalm 46:5 rises like a still pillar amid flowing water. God is within her. She will not fall. And you understand that the steadiness you carry is not something you built. It is something placed in you so you could walk through territories others tremble at before ever stepping in. When you act, you do not act to impress. You act because not acting would betray your soul. You do not tolerate delay because you have seen the destruction delay brings to those around you. Dreams that never take shape, promises to oneself left behind, years boxed in by fear disguised as caution. You do not want to live like that. You cannot live like that. And when you see someone repeat the same fear over and over, you step back, not because you look down on them, but because your soul cannot stay where energy refuses to move forward. You do not judge them. You simply cannot return to a place you already outgrew. The painful part is not their resistance. It is the subtle isolation they create when they no longer understand you. They think you are running too fast, but you are not fast. You are simply moving at your real speed. That speed makes the procrastinator feel you are drifting away. But in truth, you are not leaving them. You are drawing closer to yourself. In your silence, you see the difference between two types of people. Those who talk all their lives about what they want to do, and those who quietly start becoming who they were born to be. You are part of the second group, and that group is always misunderstood before it is ever recognized. Those who are not ready will always try to pull you down with lines like, slow down, no one does it that way. Be careful, you might fail. Who do you think you are to dream that big? But they do not understand. Failure does not frighten you. Standing still suffocates you. You have stood still before, and you remember how it felt, like your soul was forced to breathe inside a room too small. You will never return to that room again. And if you look closely, you will see this truth. The ones who talk the most are often the ones who act the least. The ones who fear the most are the ones who stay stuck the longest. The ones who doubt you the hardest are often those who abandoned themselves long ago. You do not hate them. You simply cannot stay with them. You are walking toward a life even you have not fully seen yet. You do not need to explain. You do not need to justify. You do not need to be understood. You only need to keep your pace, because there are souls waiting to meet you ahead. Souls who speak the language of action. Souls who will understand you in a single glance. Souls who know that purpose is never found in hesitation. You are leaving fear behind, not with a dramatic shout, but with steady, awakened steps. And as you walk like this, the universe shifts to make room for your path. There are seasons in your life when you realize your true strength is not found in sharp words or arguments that silence others. True strength is not found in noise. It lives in the quiet space you enter, as if you have learned to exist between two worlds. One world built on shouting and control, and another where stillness knows exactly what it is without needing to prove anything. And when you stand in that space, everything seems to shift. People do not understand why you grow quiet, but they feel that your silence is not submission, it is intention. You do not react to comparisons. You do not answer challenges. You do not join debates that exist not to understand, but to pull you into their level of fear. They hope you will flare up, explain yourself, defend yourself so they have something to hold on to, but you stand there like a stone in the middle of a river, letting the water move around you without being moved yourself. What frightens them is not the silence, but what they imagine is happening inside you during that silence. They start questioning, they start projecting, they start confronting their own instability. And because you give them nothing to latch on to, their fear grows without you lifting a finger. You do not use your voice to create power. The steadiness of your silence does that for you. You have lived through many such moments. Conversations where you knew clearly that they were not there to understand you. They were there to convince themselves that their small, familiar world was the right one. But when you refuse to play the role they expect, when you do not react the way they want, they lose control of the story. They are forced to face the truth that power does not live in noise, but in a soul that refuses to be shaken. And in those moments, you feel the strength of silence in a way most people will never understand. Silence is not retreat. Silence is not defeat. Silence is not weakness. Silence is the strength of someone who knows they do not need to enter every battle. Silence is the weapon of souls who have been misunderstood, twisted, pressured to explain themselves until they realized the value of saving their breath. You choose silence not because you fear them, but because you see the waste in fighting battles born from someone else's fear. At this stage, your soul touches a deeper recognition. There are layers of energy no longer aligned with the path you have been given. You cannot force yourself to stay in places that can no longer hold the person you are becoming. You cannot continue speaking the language of souls who chose to sleep. You cannot keep explaining to those who do not want to understand. And you no longer have the strength to convince anyone that the light you carry is real. It is then that the number 777 appears like a sacred seal, not as a sign you must search for, but as a quiet confirmation that you are standing inside a level of awakening few ever reach. 777 is the number of unlocked souls, of clarity that cannot be reversed, of seeing beneath the surface into the essence of everything. When you move in this energy, you are no longer pulled by the panic of others. You see clearly the traps disguised as smiles, and the truths hidden behind warnings presented as concern. And if in this moment the reader feels the number 777 resonate somewhere within, it is not coincidence, it is alignment. If they wish, they may share the number they feel most connected to, as a way of placing their own spiritual imprint on this journey. Because an awakening is never a one-way road. Souls always meet at the crossroads of truth. You continue walking in the silence the world does not understand. They think you are retreating, but you are moving into depths they cannot see. They think you are avoiding, but you are protecting what is sacred. They think you lack answers, but you have stepped out of the game where answers exist, only to avoid confronting fear. In your silence, you hear the shifts inside your own soul more clearly. You hear the whispers of intuition that once were drowned out by noise. You look at people not through the lens of hurt, but through the lens of someone who knows every word they speak comes from the part of themselves where they are stuck. You are no longer shaken by their attacks, because you see them as echoes of fears they have not named. And so you reach a point where silence is no longer a reaction, it becomes strategy. It keeps you from being pulled down, it preserves your energy, it protects your clarity in a world loud enough to hide its own emptiness. You walk like someone who understands that true power does not slam the table to declare itself. True power does not require winning arguments. True power does not need proof. True power simply stands in its truth, and the world adjusts around it. You are that kind of person, not because you are performing strength, but because your soul has walked through enough to know you will never waste another breath on battles that do not belong to you. You are only beginning to live fully in this energy, yet already the world around you is changing shape, changing tone, changing rhythm, not because you changed them, but because you changed yourself. And that change is so powerful, it needs no voice to be heard. It only needs you to keep walking, step by steady step, in the kind of silence no one can comprehend. There comes a point in your journey when you realize the rules people call order were never built on truth, but on fear. They exist not because they are right, but because so many believe they must obey them to feel safe. They live a pre-written life. Follow the familiar path. Keep a steady rhythm. Avoid questions. Avoid stepping too far beyond the line, and then you appear, not trying to break any rule. Yet every breath you take shakes the things they once believed were unshakable. You walk without a script, and that alone makes them look at you the way someone watches a person open a door they themselves never dared to touch. They see you allow yourself to try, then fail, then rise, then move again. They see you reject limits they treat as final borders. They see you living the very things they once believed in when they were young but abandoned when life taught them to fear the dark more than they loved the light. And in that moment, a truth no one speaks but everyone feels takes shape. Your freedom threatens their stability. Not real stability, only the illusion of stability. Because when you move differently, they must face the hardest question. If you are right, then their so-called safe choices were only compromise. And nothing hurts more than realizing one has buried their own dreams. So instead of opening, they close. Instead of asking what you have learned, they ask who you think you are. Instead of letting your light expand them, they try to make it look like the wrong direction. Some call you reckless, some say you are lucky, some say you are taking shortcuts. But they do not see that these words are fences they build to avoid the truth. They need to believe you have an advantage. They do not, so they can avoid admitting their choices were guided by fear, not desire. But you know better. You are not breaking rules. You are refusing rules created to keep the soul asleep. You are not fighting the world. You are simply not allowing the world to write your story anymore. And in that moment, you begin to see the system is not as strong as you thought. It is strong when you believe in it. It is weak when you see through it. Rules that keep people frozen exist only because no one dares to step beyond them. When you step once, the rules begin to crack. When you step twice, they begin to tremble. When you move forward with a calm no one expects, they begin to fall apart. You do not know you are becoming a threat, but they do. They know because they feel the movement inside you. They know because you stand in a place they cannot control. You walk to a rhythm they do not know, on a map they do not recognize. And when they cannot predict you, they cannot hold you. That frightens them. You become the proof of what they never wanted to face. That the rules they follow are only quick drawn lines meant to convince them the narrowness of their life is natural. When you break the mold, you do not only break your own, you create a crack of light forcing them to see the space they refuse to enter. They label you not to define you, but to protect themselves. Because if they admit you succeed because you dare, they must admit they have not succeeded because they feared. And not everyone is ready for that truth. You see the tension in their eyes, a mixture of admiration and envy, curiosity and defense, longing and fear. But you did not come to fix them. You did not come to save them. You did not come to prove your path is right. You came to live fully in your truth. And when you live this way, you do not need to break the system. The system breaks beneath your feet, not with crashing noise, but with quiet cracks forming wherever your light touches. You do not need to shout that they have been deceived. You only need to walk. Your steps become a declaration strong enough to wake those ready to awaken. Those not ready will call you foolish. Those afraid of change will call you unrealistic. Those trapped in old patterns will call you naive. But you know their reality is not your reality. They live inside a room locked from within. You live under a sky no one can cover. You are standing at a point where no criticism can move you back, because you have seen the emptiness behind the words people use to keep themselves small. You do not live to prove them wrong. You live to prove the voice inside you right. And when you stand in that truth, the system shakes not because you oppose it, but because you no longer need it. There comes a moment in your journey when you step out of all the layers of fog people have placed over their souls, and you see clearly something that was never spoken aloud. You were not born to blend into any environment. You were born to shake it. From the earliest days, your energy shifted the brightness of the places you walked through, shifted the rhythm, shifted even the way people saw themselves. You did not know this when you were young, but now, standing in a vision no longer blurred by fear, you understand. You are not a drop trying to merge into the sea. You are the storm that reshapes its surface. People look at you and wish you would soften, shrink, reduce your intensity. They say, walk gently, do not make anyone uncomfortable, do not change things too fast. But your soul does not understand those words. Your soul did not come to keep everything intact. It came to open the way, and opening the way always creates cracks in the places where others have stood still too long. You do not try to create impact. You simply live true, and truth carries more power than any worldly pattern. You have watched enough to see that those who build their lives on fear always build with fragile materials. They try to keep everything stable, not because they love stability, but because they fear change will expose what they have avoided seeing. When you walk in with a spirit no longer confined by old rules, they are the ones who feel the ground slipping beneath them. They do not fear you. They fear what you make them feel, the truth that they have lived below their own potential for far too long. But you cannot return to make them comfortable. You have walked beyond their words, beyond the gaze they use to keep you small. Your light, once awakened, does not know how to retreat. That light does not apologize for its strength. It simply does what light is born to do: illuminate. In this stage, Psalm 27:1 becomes the breath that walks beside you. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? Not a line meant to threaten the dark, but a reminder of the source of the strength you carry. You stand tall not because you are stubborn. You stand tall because light never kneels. It shines. And you begin to see clearly that you were not sent into the world to be background. You were sent to change the landscape. You are not a voice blending into the crowd. You are the echo waking souls that have slept too long. You are not a disruptor. You are a reminder. Every place you pass through, you do not leave calm behind. You leave movement. Every conversation you touch does not stay on the surface. It reveals what has been unsaid. Every decision you make forces others to look at their own direction and wonder why they never dared to move. You shift the room not by force, but by truth. You are the storm that breaks the illusions people have grown comfortable inside. Not a storm that destroys, but a storm that reminds them the wind has the right to change direction, that the sun has the right to pierce through no matter how heavy the clouds. Storms do not ask permission. Storms recreate the sky. And that is you. You no longer need anyone's approval to take your next step. You no longer search for agreement in their eyes. You no longer tremble when standing in the place your soul has reclaimed. Your strength is not rebellion against the world. It is the affirmation that you will no longer rebel against yourself. As you walk in that truth, the souls afraid of light will drift away. Those clinging to darkness will not understand you. The voices calling you too much, too different, too strong will fade like echoes from a world you no longer belong to. But those who share your frequency will find you. They will recognize you by heartbeat, not by words. They will understand you by intuition, not by expectation. You have walked far enough to know that no one can control a person who no longer lives in fear, and you are that person. No one writes your story anymore. No system can twist the limits you are breaking. No earthly force can make you shrink again. You came to shift what once seemed immovable. You came to open the path for those willing to face the truth. You came to be the proof that light does not ask permission to exist. And when you accept that role, the role your entire life has prepared you for, you become something no system can contain. A free soul, a storm that redraws the sky, a thunderclap in a sleeping land. Not everyone will keep pace with this journey, but the ones who are called, they will recognize you, and they will walk toward the light you dared to hold.
Grateful that you chose to spend these moments in the light of this story. If it touched your soul, please like, share, and subscribe, and ring the bell so the next whisper of light may find its way back to you.